My Lord and my God, I firmly believe that you are here, that you see me, that you hear me. I adore you with profound reverence. I ask your pardon for my sins and the grace to make this time of prayer fruitful. My Immaculate Mother, Saint Joseph, my Father and Lord, my guardian angel, intercede for me. Today we have a mysterious passage from the Gospel of St. Matthew, and it comes right after the account of the parable of the sower. The sower, who throws the seed that has different results, all depending on the kind of land or kind of earth that it lands on. Just think of that image of Jesus presenting this image of the sower. It was for them like a movie to them that touched them deeply, but at the same time also left them confused and uncertain. Just like when you watch a movie, you're not exactly always sure why things happened. And these people understood perhaps about thinking of that sower, that they wanted to be good earth. Jesus was clearly appealing to their sense of responsibility for the fruits of their life, their actions, their behavior. And they wanted to be like good earth, but it was still confusing. So today we have this moment where we have a kind of a follow-up on this sower. We hear from Matthew here. The disciples approached Jesus and said, "Why do you speak to the crowd in parables?" Well, this is not the first time that Jesus spoke in parables. In fact, I counted 48 times in the New Testament when he speaks about parables or uses parables. So Jesus responds to this question, why do you speak in parables, as a way of helping them understand the kingdom, that he's inaugurating a kingdom, and that he relies for that kingdom on a really free response. And so this is what he says to this question. He says, "Because knowledge of the mysteries of the kingdom of heaven has been granted to you, but to them it has not been granted. To anyone who has, more will be given, and he will grow rich. From anyone who has not, even what he has will be taken away. This is why I speak to them in parables, because they look but do not see, and hear but do not listen or understand." That's a mysterious answer, that some understand, some and some don't. Then he goes on to quote Isaiah, who speaks about those who don't understand, and that they have a hard heart, and he is suggesting that he's offering them something very rich, something very beautiful, an invitation to the beauty of the kingdom, but that this invitation will require their free response, that is to really listen. A free desire to understand it and embrace it. He's suggesting this is not about some nationalistic, earthbound idea of a Messiah that I'm proposing here, really is what he's saying. And he's saying that if people were well disposed to him, well, the enigmatic nature of that parable would suddenly stimulate their interest. They would become more open to the transcendental nature of this kingdom. And then he would be able to explain it more. Like if you watch a movie and you're really, wow, I'm really interested, you would ask more questions. But there's no point in doing this if people are just not ready to listen. They're not interested. So what the Lord is saying really is this, that the real purpose of a parable is to serve as an analogy, or you could say as an image of something that is not all that easy to understand. It takes time to understand. It's like shading your eyes from the blinding light of the sun. You can't just look at the sun. You have to shade your eyes. And those parables are there to both to reveal and at the same time to conceal the divine mysteries. Parables invite the humble to reach behind those images and to lay hold of God's truth. The parables, they sketch out like an earthly scenario that reveals heavenly mysteries. But conversely, they also obstruct the proud and conceal divine mysteries from the unworthy. And the ones that are unworthy are the proud. So imagine some were thinking about the material things of the earth there in that sower account. They might have asked, has my treatment of my spouse been a little bit like that dry, cakey side of the road? right? That the seed didn't go in, right? That they would apply that image to their own life. Whereas as soon as I have an opportunity to improve my listening, my refinement with my spouse, well, maybe I'm just running off doing something else, like those birds that ate up the seed. Maybe we're like those birds that take up the seed, those opportunities. Or the account of the seed that falls on rocky ground. It's like an image of our life of piety. I feel maybe a little interest in God's call. He's inviting me to spend some time with Him, time of prayer, and maybe I even agree that this is a good thing for me. But yeah, and then I just scroll on my phone, I go back to social media. I'm like that hard ground. And of course the seed can't take root in hard ground. So Jesus uses these parables, and in there He would have woven in questions, and people would have thought about them. Other people would have said, whatever. They just shrug their shoulders. They just say, whatever. That's why He's saying those parables. He either invites us to ask, or we could also say, whatever. Lord, I don't want to say whatever to the appeals that you're making to embrace the truth of the kingdom. But why did He say this? He said, knowledge of the mysteries of the kingdom of heaven has been granted to you, but to them it has not been granted. Like some yes and others no. How can it be that divine revelation and grace produce such widely differing responses in people? Why is that? Well, the answer is that, there are different responses because some who hear it with humility, and others hear it with pride. These parables, in other words, they work for the humble, they work for the simple, but they just don't work for the proud, the self-centered, those who don't think they need instruction, who think that they're fine. And we see from the harsh words quoted from Isaiah, and indeed from the Lord Himself, that parables have a kind of like a second, albeit negative function, and they are spoken of as judgments on the faithless. They help the humble, but they condemn the faithless or the proud. So as we go through Matthew, we see that Jesus shifts at this point from just these like straightforward teachings, like teachings about the Beatitudes, or about like almsgiving, or prayer and fasting, or about trusting in God's providence, or doing God's will. And from that teaching, He goes to parables. He tells about the sower. He tells about the weeds. He tells about the mustard seed, the hidden treasure in the field. And immediately following, this all happens after He was rejected by the Pharisees. It's like the prophets in the Old Testament. We see that. Like Jotham, who spoke of the parables of the tree and exposed the folly of choosing an unworthy king. Or remember Nathan's story of the rich man who had stolen the poor man's little lamb. And he said that to David. And David, the king, was humble enough to recognize, after some prodding, but he was able to recognize that this was about him, about his sin. Well, Jesus speaks parables for the benefit of the faithful and for the judgment of unbelievers. Lord, you speak for my benefit. You want me to convert. You want me to examine myself when I hear those parables. You want me to take your teaching seriously and to say yes to you, to convert like King David, who did a bad thing but was humble enough to convert after hearing a simple story of a lamb. It was really a parable of a lamb. Let us not assume that we have understood it all, that we've been there, we've heard that before. Maybe if we were to make an act of humility every time we hear a parable and read it with faith, Maybe you could speak to us in unheard of ways. But, of course, the parables also come maybe from your spouse, from your children, from your friends, your co-workers. There, too, there are parables for us to learn if we are humble. And perhaps the next story, the next parable will be like for us, like an entire encyclical for our instruction. But we need to be humble so that, they help us advance, coming into the kingdom of God. I thank you, my God, for the good resolutions, affections, and inspirations you have communicated to me in this meditation. I ask your help to put them into effect. My Immaculate Mother, Saint Joseph, my Father and Lord, my guardian angel, intercede for me.